Welcome to Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we analyze the policies and political strategies of Trump 2.0 and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. On February 21st, the White House issued an America First investment policy memorandum, directing key federal agencies to tighten restrictions on China-related investments in critical sectors, primarily targeting sensitive technologies, whether outbound or inbound to the United States. As the US-China tech rivalry intensifies, there's growing curiosity about China's startup ecosystem, fueled by headlines about innovations from companies like DeepSeek, TikTok, BYD, and others. What's the startup scene like in China over the last 10 to 15 years? Why did the Chinese government once enthusiastically support startups, only to pivot and discourage overseas IPOs while cracking down on specific sectors? How has the US-China tech rivalry impacted these startups? What's driving them to expand globally, or called Chuhai, and still find ways into the US market despite growing restrictions? To answer those questions, we speak with Gang Lu, founder of TechNode, the go-to platform for all things China tech startups. Gang has a PhD in electrical engineering from the United Kingdom. His passion for tech startups began with reading TechCrunch. The publication covering Silicon Valley startups inspired him to become a tech blogger and eventually a media entrepreneur. Over the years, he's founded multiple platforms focused on technology, trends, and innovation from China to Southeast Asia. So welcome, Gang. Thanks for joining us today. Can you share with us, how did you start your journalism career?
Actually, my background is nothing to do with journalist. I did my master in EE, my PhD in computer science. So actually my background is totally, I would say like kind of like a geek background. But the reason I started my media business is I think it's like back to 2007. I was doing my PhD in UK. I think that time people say it's the Web 2.0 era. So I started reading tech blog like TechCrunch, like Venture.bee, there are several others. So I feel, especially TechCrunch, I feel I was so inspired by the articles they publish every day, because that time, like almost every day, you're gonna see like one or two new startups in Silicon Valley. They are doing something amazing, like a new business model, new technology, new gadget. Everything is so fascinating. And to me, the first idea came to me was, why there's nothing like TechCrunch in China?
Was China's tech sector as innovative back then? You were talking about 2007, right?
No, I think not at all. I think that time is very, 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 very early stage in China. You saw some very few of startups. So the one thing is I started reading, tech, basically I was educated by the tech media, tech blog. But on the other hand, because I stay in UK for like 7 years, I read lots of English media talking about China, talking about Chinese tech ecosystem. Only like two keywords when the English media talk about China. The first keyword is censorship. One is copycats.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say, both were not true, but also on the other hand, there are some startups, they were working so hard, they're trying to do something innovative, but English media never cover them. So I think we need something like TechCrunch in China to write about the startups, to write about the new ideas.
Why wasn't there enough English media coverage of Chinese tech companies at that time? Because actually 2007, I believe most Western media still had presence in China, right? And even censorship, I don't think it was full censorship back then. I think Google was still okay, right?
Yeah, I was interested in the startups. TechCrunch were famous because they cover a lot about your startup in Silicon Valley. Of course, that time there was English media, they covering Chinese tech ecosystem, but most of the focus, they are focused on big guys like Baidu, basically like the BAT. That's the first reason. Second reason, because that time, I think the startup ecosystem in China was not mature at all, because you didn't see that much of early stage investment. You didn't see that much of venture capitals, and most of venture capital actually came from, they are like from US. There are not that much IMB and like basically Chinese VC at all. So the startup ecosystem were very, very small at that time. So, and also the third reason is 90% or 95% of Chinese startups, they focus on China only. So they were not, it's not like today, everybody talk about like true high, they're going overseas market. I think that time is totally different. So actually the first step, I email to the founder of TechCrunch, but obviously because I was nobody there, that time, so I never get a response.
So you wrote an email to the founder of TechCrunch for what? What did you want him to do?
Basically, it said, "Oh, I'm from China. I was passionate by tech. I was so like inspired by your blog. So I just suggested, are you interested in like opening like TechCrunch China chapter?" So basically, I just suggest maybe I'm volunteers. Probably I can do something. Maybe translate your English content to Chinese, or maybe can write something on my own. But yeah, so basically, then of course is nobody respond to me. So I say, oh, well, okay, so probably I just start something on my own. But yeah, so basically that time is I say I have no intention to become kind of a journalist or to run a media business. So basically, I just started my own blog and writing about Chinese startups, the people I know, the founder I know.
And the blog was in Chinese or in English? Who was your intended audience at that time?
Yeah, I think at the very beginning, because honestly I didn't have any like plan. So sometimes I write in Chinese, sometimes I write in English. So I think if you go back like maybe over 10 years back to TechNode, you can find some the articles sometimes in English, sometimes in Chinese. But it's funny. It's what's quite funny is one day I started receiving email from the boss of the VC based in China, because I realized they started reading my blog, but they feel my view and angle is quite different from the traditional kind of English media.
Do they work for, let's say, an American VC but based in China? The reason why I ask is because are they originally from China? And that is a topic I also want to talk about, the VC ecosystem in China. How is it set up?
The first batch of the VC started investing into China. Sequoia or Matrix, IDG, they all from US, right? Then all the VC, they have like a Chinese chapter, basically set up China office, then started investing in the Chinese market. At the very beginning, they came from US or even based in US, but they have office in China. They read English media. They started reading my articles, then forward my articles to their Chinese colleagues. Then their Chinese colleagues approach me if they want to find people they think familiar with the local ecosystem. Then so I started know all these VC. Then all these VC, they also help me to reach out their portfolios. I moved back to China like 2008. So basically from 27 until 2012, the techno, the media, the blog, it was just my hobby.
So there was no registration. It wasn't an entity. It was just something that you created.
I think until around like 2012, basically like two things. The first is China has the 3G, the mobile network, like the turning point for the Chinese tech ecosystem. The hardware side, the infrastructure, we have 3G networks, and on the software side, we have like payment system, WeChat or Alipay. Then WeChat build the fundamental part for the like internet business in China. I think around 2012 or 2013. So all of a sudden, we were seeing the more and more startups, like they are started working on the mobile internet. I think that's really how the Chinese tech startup ecosystem took off. So I feel, wow, probably the market is ready for tech media. And the second part is also important. Is a good friend of mine came to me and say, "Hey, Gang, you should be the Michael Eriton, the founder of TechCrunch." He know I was so kind of passionate being like a tech blogger. So basically he said, "Oh, let me become your like seed investor. Take the money, turn your hobby into." So yeah, so I was stupid enough, and to take the money and then started the business.
I remember when I arrived in China, that was in 2014. There were just already so many new startups, but I think the government played a huge role in this as well. Was that the Li Keqiang at that time was using something like 大众创新?
大众创新，万众创业。
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, it's about everyone should innovate and everyone should start a company, right? It was almost like a government policy for everyone to be an entrepreneur. And as you mentioned yourself, even you got the bug, right? So many people were interested in starting their own companies.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's around like probably 2015, a long time. So that the government, basically, jump into the ecosystem, then tell everybody, all the young generation, say, hey, you should maybe after graduate, instead of going to the big corporates, probably you should try something on your own and start your own.
Why do you think the government wanted people to become entrepreneurs?
I think the government started realizing technology is probably the most important part for the whole country and to move forward. Secondly, the competition after the graduate, basically job hunting, is really tough. That's why the government say maybe that time it's not easy to find a job, but maybe you can start something on your own.
Because I remember I was at Goldman Sachs at that time, and we ran a program. It's to support women entrepreneurs. It was just something that the government absolutely supports. Universities support it. There are all kinds of training programs to help train entrepreneurs, give them education. 2015, when the government was really pushing it, but the society was already starting a couple years ago. The government just sort of caught the trend and created a more enabling environment.
I think the government role was very important. Well, of course, it's not everything they did is healthy to the ecosystem. When I started my own company, I think in my generation, almost all the parents of my generation, if they tell them, "Oh, I'm going to do something on my own," they would say no. They always say, "Oh, you should go to the bank or all the traditional job, because that's a reliable, stable lifestyle." So, but I think because the people like me, my generation, I think because we kind of went through the whole kind of movement, and then we are sort of like educated by all the startup entrepreneurship, the ideas. So I think the big impact to the Chinese society is if my kids one day, after they grow up, they say, oh, they're going to start something on their own, I would say yes. They kind of embrace the idea of entrepreneurship. So I would very encourage my kids to do something on their own. So which has never happened before, I would say. I think that's probably the biggest impact to the Chinese, society. But of course, on the opposite side, the government did many things not really healthy to the ecosystem. I mean, they want help, but actually, eventually, but they didn't help. Just maybe just one example is, that WeWork just started. So there are times that you see so many like co-working space in China.
It's around what time? 2014? Is that right? Or 15?
2015.
Yeah.
Yeah. We saw so many startups. You need a new working space. Like co-working space is very suitable for all the startups. But when the government came in, they wanted to help the startups. So basically, the government say, "Hey, we have so many space. We're going to give you for free," which sounds nice to startups, but actually all startups get spoiled. All the co-working space, the business owner, they can get funded from the government to run the space. But after 1 year, because nobody going to pay, then all of a sudden the business model that didn't work at all. It became kind of mess in the co-working space market.
Just a couple years later, things seem to have turned in a different direction. The government became less interested in helping tech entrepreneurs in particular, and there wasn't even a series of crackdown on tech companies. Can you explain what happened?
The first is, in the past like 20 years or 15 years, the Chinese tech ecosystem is really kind of in the hype, right? Like not the government, but the VCs, they are pouring so much money to invest into the startup ecosystem. So that's why we have so many unicorns in China. The figures grew like amazingly every year. So all the startup valuation, they were so high, unbelievable high. But after the first round of investment, maybe like 3 years after the first round investment, then we have to kind of face the reality. We are investing so much money. Where are the revenues? There are many startups, they raise so much, but after like 5 years, they are still losing money.
It's not a sustainable business model. Can you help our listeners understand the connection between individual business burning money to what is the risk to the economy?
It's not like US, because in China, is if you see there one business opportunity, you're going to see not just one player. You're going to see over 100 or even more players working in the same sector. Imagine, well, we have like such a huge population, a huge market, but in the same vertical, if you see like 200 players in the same market, everybody wants to share the cake. But if you look at most of them, actually, technology-wise, they are more or less the same, right?
That is a little bit of a copycat culture, right? So something is innovative and new, and then everyone else will follow. It's almost very hard to be the first mover in China, in my view, because the next day there's going to be 10 more, and then the following week there's going to be 100 more, right?
Yeah, I think copycat is probably just one thing, but I don't know if the to do is sort of like Chinese philosophy, because everybody think, okay, China has a huge market, right? Because if I based in Shanghai, if we see some our company doing something in Beijing, I would say actually something to take care Shanghai or the
market is big enough for a lot.
Yeah, I think everybody think on day one, but eventually I would say like maybe the China founder, they are ambitious or they are aggressive. Is a rebuilding. If you look at maybe give an example. I think the Tencent and Alibaba. I think when they started, Tencent is really focused on like QQ, the instant messaging, the entertainment side, the game, right? The Alibaba is only focused on e-commerce. I think it's that time is early days is really peace. They are really in pace because they don't really tap into each other. But then later on, when Tencent getting bigger, then Tencent launched something into e-commerce, or they invest into the e-commerce startups. Then Alibaba is doing the same. What Alibaba were trying to enter the instant messaging industry as well. Alibaba enters the entertainment side. So they started to compete with each other. So that's why the market becomes so tough, in the domestic market.
Mhm. Yeah, as you said, everyone's so ambitious, so they're not satisfied with just their own starting point. They're more interested in getting into others' territories, and they all want to grow their business to be this mega giant business. So they're constantly trying to kill so many different competitors. It was definitely a very tough and super competitive market. Any other reason that the government wanted to crack down on the tech sector?
I don't think crackdown is the right word to describe that. I think that the government involvement or the government action is quite different in different sectors. I think maybe 5 years ago is government supporting everything, but now it's kind of calm down to say, oh, maybe in some sector, for example, what happened several years ago in the online education, government basically say no. That's why I think there are quite a few online education unicorns. It's just like all of a sudden they disappear.
There was a legal scholar who's excellent, Angela Zhang. She was saying for a while the government was so hands off, especially in the technology sector. Many companies have become so arrogant almost, and there are no real guardrails. In the end, the government felt that it's about time to actually have proper regulations. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. There's data issues. DD also became an issue.
Everything is happening in China. All these tech companies, I wouldn't relate to the government's regulation. But when we talk about the cross-border, I think we see more and more a kind of China's regulation involved. If you look at the new kings of China internet, ByteDance, the Chinese company, Chinese government really regulates everybody there. I don't think they're going to be. They can be. I think they can be so big in China. And also, most of them, I think they really industry driven. They basically just raise money from VC and run by run.
That's very interesting. You're the first one I spoke to that didn't think the government regulation was directly responsible for the stagnation of the tech sector in China. And you kind of referenced that you felt that in the case of DD, for example, it wasn't really about Chinese government regulation. It was more about US-China rivalry. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think to me, yes. As the kind of observer or even like as a consumer, because I think I feel no issues with data.
So would you say there are a lot of companies like that around that time became victim to US-China rivalry?
Yeah, I think that time still probably the first choice for the Chinese tech companies. They want to be listed in Nasdaq or New York. They are looking at the overseas exchange. So I think the DD, I don't know if the first case or not, but I think DD become kind of the cases then started like warning the Chinese tech companies. Oh, if you go overseas, probably the data become the key issues for both sides.
I mean, clearly a lot less Chinese companies are looking to be listed in New York these days. And many still would like to if they can, right? And Shein, for example, I think they wanted to, and then they pivoted to London, and now I don't know what's happening to their IPO plan.
Yeah. I don't think it's a good thing to Chinese companies because if you look at there are still that many new tech companies, they are doing the international business, right? So that's the reason they want to be IPO. If they only focus on China, they're going to like Shenzhen or Hong Kong, and to be listed. they are looking overseas market. I think they even some of them, if you look at the market share or the revenue, maybe the more than half the revenues actually come from overseas instead of from China. And to me, it's unfair to these companies, right?
Let's talk about that. I think US-China rivalry has become a very difficult risk factor to Chinese companies, but also American companies. And actually, more than just Chinese and American, it's a lot of companies who are global by nature. What are some of the implications you're seeing?
I think the China-US trade war is getting more serious than before. But if you look at Chinese tech industry, you see more Chinese tech companies go to the overseas market. They are facing, much more pressure or challenging outside China even than before. Right?
And they
So
wanted to go overseas because
the first one, domestic competition in China, because it's so tough, and also even become tougher than before. In the same sector, there are so many same players. The technology they have more or less the same, but what they can do to become the market leader, the only thing they can do is to compete with price. Everyone is like, they're cutting down the price in order to have more market share, which is actually not healthy. So that's why company, they want to go to the overseas market because they know the product are good. Their price is even more expensive than in China. So basically they can still have revenues or have a profit if they go to overseas. The second one is the Chinese, the economy in China right now is kind of the downside for the Chinese economy. And so we're talking about consumption downgrade. 5 or 10 years ago, we are talking about consumption upgrade. Like basically people are looking at the better product and with more expensive price. But now we're looking at is the product but with a cheaper price because the economy in China is not that good as like compared to 5 years ago. The third reason is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we talk about Chinese tech companies, basically they are trying to compete with overseas market with a cheaper price, but just okay products. I mean, quality wise. But now because the Chinese tech companies, technology wise, I think in some sector they are really the lead in the global market. So I think they feel more confident, to enter the overseas market, right? If you look at like EV, robots, maybe even in some like healthcare.
Clearly, there's the price advantage. Their products are really good. They also have very competitive business models. They have the know-hows, and there's the demand. So it seems like the environment is ripe for a lot of those Chinese tech companies to go abroad. But have they been successful? And if not, what are some of the reasons?
You mentioned like Shein, which is the e-commerce, and I also save others like EV, BYD. I think there are many very successful cases right now. But the biggest challenge is I would say if you ask most of the tech company in China, if they can pick which country or which region will be the priority market, they would say US still, because first of all the US market is huge, it's massive as well.
It's
So secondly,
yes.
yeah, and also I think it's a US still. I think basically they have the consumption power to buy the Chinese product. I mean, especially like consumer electronics product, right? I think the same thing. I think it's now maybe to give another example is maybe we are in China. When we talk about like going overseas, I think the past maybe 3 or 4 years, lots of people talking about Southeast Asia market, right? Which is of course it's true. Is Southeast Asia market has a lot of potential, population wise, the market-wise is a huge market as well. But if you look at what we strong at right now from China, we are very strong in EV. We are very strong in robotics. But actually, all these like kind of products is too early to Southeast Asia because their infrastructure is not ready yet. They don't have that much consumption power compared with the US or even like EU. So that's why even now we are talking about we are trying to do more business in Asia for China tech company. But I think the most attractive one still is Japan and Korea.
The Middle East and Europe.
Yeah, I think the people looking at that, I think people are interested in the money from Middle East. For market, there's still lots of space to be explored in Middle East.
You mean capital in the Middle East, the investors?
Yes, the capital investors
are very interested in Chinese companies going to their countries to invest.
Yeah. Yes, for EU, there's the gap between EU and China in the tech space. China, 10 years ago, we are looking at Silicon Valley, that's the US only. But now basically we kind of stop. But we have a very limited knowledge about EU. And also EU probably still is a very fragmented market as well, because so many countries there. So that's why for a Chinese company, feel it might be very difficult for Chinese company to enter EU. Maybe they pick UK or France,
Germany,
or Germany. Yeah, maybe those are top three they're looking at. But US still, I think I was in CES this year. It's I haven't been there for like 5 years, but surprisingly or not surprisingly, still even we see China US trade war right now is getting more serious or more tough. But still, if you look at CES, most of the hardware, the consumer electronics product, like they are shining at CES. Most of them they are like Chinese companies.
Yeah, it says a lot about how much Chinese tech companies still wanted the US market.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Even we talk so much about like China US, the trade war, the decoupling, blah blah. But still, the reality is the US market is still the number one market for many Chinese consumer tech companies.
What do you think is the next big thing for Chinese innovation? We had the DeepSeek moment a couple of weeks ago. I mean, that seemed to be quite a breakthrough.
To me, I would say still AI will be lots of things happening in AI space. I think especially in China, China is sort of heaven for the AI applications. So with DeepSeek, with many other AI companies, I'm sure that we're going to see many more great application built on the AI technology, not just in the software level, but also in the hardware level. I think they're going to disrupt all industries in the next 1 to 5 years. Secondly, I think robots, is more like on the hardware side. Probably you heard of Unitree. It's more like kind of Chinese Boston Dynamics. They're working on the humanoid, the robots. They are one of the hottest startup right now in China. But actually, if you go around in Shenzhen and Beijing, even some several other city, actually you can see many more company working on the robots, for the industry, for the consumer. So I think robots is something we are really looking forward. And also in China, I think it just happened in the past 1 year. There's something we call low altitude economy. So basically, it's something like flying car. I think now it's really like everybody is talking about flying car. I think also the ecosystems to do with low latitude economies. So I don't know. Maybe we still need another 5 years because the China-U.S. trade war. So actually, the communication between China and U.S. is just getting less and less.
Even
So
at the business level, I feel still a lot of travel communication between the two countries, especially by people who have connections to China or, Chinese people themselves.
yeah, but yes, business is business. But I would say like compare with 10 years ago, it's like very different. I was there like this January, what last month we can still check out some of the tech companies there, but the conversation kind of weird. Basically, the conversation is all about like it's like a friends chat. It's nothing to do with business anymore because everybody know it doesn't make sense. Is are you interested in investing to the China tech company? We try to avoid all the topics because doesn't we don't think that can happen anyway.
Yeah, and I think it will continue under President Trump. We're already seeing some of the actions he's taken on imposing tariffs, and we're also seeing Chinese government responding by other means, tools they have. For example, restriction of rare minerals exports to the US or investigating US tech giants, right? These are a response and likely to continue if it doesn't get worse over the next few years. The Chinese government has also learned that self-sufficiency is necessary for where the country is right now. So from hardware, especially hardware, to software, it seems to be trying to build up economic fortress.
Of course, this is something we don't want to see. I was running TechNode. I was also bringing TechCrunch to China. I was tapping into both sides of tech startup ecosystems.
Do you think Chinese companies understand what is fundamentally the issue between US and China? The US side, at least what Washington, D.C. is saying, they're very concerned about any action that would support Chinese technology companies because Chinese technology companies are controlled by the Chinese government. And in certain cases, they even benefit the People's Liberation Army. So it's really about this business and government relations because some people don't believe that Chinese companies can be truly private.
No, I think it's really is a misunderstanding. At least to me, I don't know the big guys. Even as a media, because I'm only touch the tech media, did not have much of a kind of influence by the government. We run all the tech event in China. Of course, the government gave us like funding to do the events. I think that's it. Sometimes we feel the government don't really understand how startup ecosystem works, but still maybe they try to help in a different way, in a wrong way. The startup don't want to see that, but still, it cannot be said the startup ecosystem is controlled by the government.
Well, I have to ask you, what do you think is going to happen to TikTok?
Well, it's just my guess, my pure guess is I think somebody will buy TikTok. That's just my guess.
Some American, right?
Yes, American, yes.
And you think the Chinese government will be okay with that?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because it is up to the Chinese government as well.
I really don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think this one is really hard because you already have President Trump and President Xi talking about this business deal. So, and Elon Musk said he doesn't want to buy TikTok. So who else does Beijing trust enough to actually buy TikTok? I think we'll see very soon.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what's your guess?
I don't know. I think there's going to be a deal. I think President Trump will make sure it happens. But how much control does he really have to convince the Beijing government? I think that's a different matter. And so that's more on the political side. And, the actual business deal itself is also very, very complicated. And I think that actually is a bigger hurdle. I think it's right now less of a political issue. It's more of a true business challenge. That's
Yeah.
not that I know anything, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that would be a very complicated case.
And I am curious, how do Chinese people feel about this? Do Chinese people want to see TikTok being sold or no?
No, I think it's I might be wrong, but to me, I feel to the like a consumer, like the users, everybody knows Douyin. They don't really know what's TikTok. I don't think that that much of a influence. Basically, just news, but people don't really feel that's something big.
Okay, that's interesting because I thought that's pretty big news in China when
I think maybe in the tech space, I mean in the tech industry, the people inside industry, the big, but for the just for user, they don't use TikTok
probably
at
don't
all.
know.
Yeah, they just know Douyin. So
Yeah. On that, well, I want to thank you. It's been fascinating to hear from you. And I can understand why now there was an investor interested in having you start TechNode, because clearly having a different perspective, looking at this Chinese tech ecosystem and Chinese tech companies is really important. So thank you again for sharing with us your perspective.
yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
In less than 20 years, China's startup scene has undergone a dramatic transformation. Everything seems to operate at an intensity and speed unmatched by other parts of the world. From encouraging entrepreneurship to tightening regulations on specific sectors, the government's role has been pivotal, sometimes productive, other times counterproductive. What's the next DeepSeek moment from China? How will startups navigate survival under the heightened US-China tech competition and investment restrictions? The story of China's startups is one of drama, resilience, and inspiration. This is Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we analyze the policies and political strategies of Trump 2.0 and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Thank you for joining us for the 5th episode of our series on Chinese technology companies and entrepreneurs. Previous discussions cover topics like the TikTok phenomenon, DeepSeek's role in the US-China AI race, China's tech entrepreneurs, and its equity markets. We value your feedback. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast. See you next week.